Raymond's voice still echoed through the back office, a dull, pathetic murmur muffled by the thick walls and the quiet authority of Monroe Holdings' security team. Outside his office door, Louise leaned on a broom he didn't need to hold anymore. Jordan stood beside him, clutching a fresh set of keys that felt heavier than they looked. Beyond them, the main dining room lay empty for the first time in years. No clinking glasses, no polite laughter hiding sharper truths. Just silence, raw and honest, soaked into the velvet chairs and the polished bar. Elise walked through it all like a queen surveying a kingdom ready for rebirth. Her heels clicked across the marble Raymond once called his throne room. Every step scrubbed away a little more of his stain. She paused by the Mater Dei stand, fingers brushing over the wood where he'd once slammed down her torn reservation slip. Jordan cleared his throat. "Ms. Monroe." "Elise," she corrected gently. "No Ms. tonight. We're all family now." Jordan's lips twitched into a shy smile. He held out the keys. "You should have these back." Elise looked at him, young, steady, carrying the echo of 1,000 silenced voices. She curled his fingers around the keys instead. "No," she said. "You keep them. This place is yours now, yours, Luce's, everyone's who stood here and kept it alive when he tried to choke the life out of it." Louise huffed a dry laugh. "You're giving this place to us?" Elise turned, taking in the empty tables and soft shadows. She didn't see what was. She saw what could be. "I'm giving you the chance to make something that feeds more than just the rich." She sighed. "This block, my block, is going to be different. We'll gut this place if we have to. Build a kitchen that trains young chefs who can't afford culinary school. Open the doors to families who've never sat under these chandeliers because some fool thought linen napkins made him a king." Louise blinked, throat working around words he'd never imagined he'd say. "And you trust us to run it?" Elise stepped closer, rested a hand on his shoulder. "You've been running it this whole time." He just took the credit. A laugh bubbled out of Jordan, young and bright and exhausted. "What do you call it?" he asked. Elise looked around at the dusty corners that had hidden cruelty behind silk curtains, at the walls that had trapped whispered slurs like smoke. She smiled, for real this time. The first true smile since she'd stepped through these doors and tasted Raymond's. "Poison. The open table," she said. "No reservations needed." Luce's chuckle cracked into a soft, hoarse cheer. Jordan's grin split wide, the keys clutched tight in his palm like a medal. Outside, neon lights flickered down the block, a city forever humming with secrets and second chances. Elise turned toward the window, watching Monroe Tower blaze. Across the night sky, she remembered her father's voice, his stories about working double shifts in restaurants that wouldn't let him eat in the dining room he scrubbed clean. She remembered her mother teaching her to sign her name big and bold on contracts nobody could tear in half. Now here she stood, contracts honored, marble floors retaken, keys handed over to the people who should have owned them all along. "Tomorrow," she said softly, repeating the words she'd whispered in her tower when the hammer first lifted. "We start fresh tomorrow." Louise pushed away from the broom, shoulders lighter than they'd felt in decades. Jordan slipped the keys into his pocket. Heavy, warm, real. Together, they stood in the hush of the emptied hall. No chandeliers glittered for Raymond anymore. No whispered insults slid across the floor unseen. Just voices ready to speak, tables ready to welcome everyone. Outside, the first hint of dawn bent around the city's edges, not golden yet, but patient. A promise. And deep under the marble, where old secrets once slept, new roots took hold, humble and hungry and strong enough to crack stone. Inside an upscale restaurant buzzing with whispers, a black woman is publicly humiliated when she's told she's not welcome. The arrogant manager flaunts his power in front of silent onlookers. But the woman's quiet strength leaves behind a chilling promise as she walks out, hinting that this dinner is far from over. We don't serve people like you. The words cracked across the polished marble floor like a slap. Every fork paused mid-air, wine glasses froze inches from lips. Crystal chandeliers spilled golden light onto the tense hush dot inside La Fleur de Lis, the most exclusive French restaurant in the city. Money dripped off velvet curtains and starched linen tablecloths. But tonight, all that shine dimmed under the weight of one man's arrogance. Raymond Archer, the manager, tall, manicured beard, a suit too tight for his ego, stood with arms folded at the entrance. His voice oozed entitlement, tinged with the polite cruelty of someone who had never been told no. Patrons turned their heads just enough to watch, but not enough to get involved. A couple in the corner pulled their napkins closer, pretending to read menus they knew by heart. A waiter by the wine rack tightened his grip on a crystal decanter. No one spoke. She stood still, alone, ebony skin shimmering under the golden glow, hair braided into an elegant crown that made her look like she owned every star above this city. Her name was Elise Monroe, but the room didn't know her name. Not yet. Her eyes drifted over the table she'd eaten at years before, back when this place treated her like royalty when they didn't know. Ma'am, I'll ask you one more time. Raymond's teeth gleamed in the reflection of the glass door behind him. Leave, or I'll call security. You can finish your meal elsewhere. He gestured at her empty table. No menu, no water, no place setting. Just her presence, unwelcome. Someone near the bar muttered ridiculous, but when Elise turned, the voice shrank into the clink of ice cubes. She exhaled slowly. The sting of humiliation clawed at her chest, but her expression didn't flinch. Years of boardroom battles had taught her how to wear calm like a bulletproof coat. She reached into her purse, pulled out her reservation slip embossed in gold, and handed it over. Raymond didn't look at it. He snatched it, tore it in, half with a dramatic flick of his wrist, and let the pieces drift to the marble floor like falling petals. This isn't your kind of place, he hissed. Take the hint. A hush of collective discomfort rolled through the dining hall. But no one moved. The chef peeked from the kitchen window, wiped his brow, then vanished behind the swinging door. Elise bent down, picked up the torn slip. Her fingers brushed the marble where dozens of feet had walked past injustice 1,000 times before. She stood, smoothing her coat sleeve, her eyes locked on Raymond's smug grin, the same grin that had closed countless doors on people like her for generations. She smiled. Just once. The kind of smile that made the lights flicker, the chandeliers tremble. Thank you for the reminder, she said, her voice smooth as velvet and sharp as broken glass. I'll make sure you remember me too. She turned on her heel, her stiletto echoing like a judge's gavel across the silent hall. At the door, she paused. She didn't look back, just placed the torn slip on the Mater Dei stand, her fingertips lingering on the polished wood. Outside, the summer night wrapped around her shoulders like a crown of secrets. Elise inhaled the city air, bitter, electric. Somewhere behind the curtained windows, the diners exhaled their relief. The world outside that door had no idea that within hours, La Fleur de Lis would never taste the same again, and neither would Raymond Archer. The torn slip still sat on the Mater Dei stand, mocking Raymond each time he glanced its way. He tried to ignore it, smoothing down his silk tie, nodding politely to patrons who pretended not to see his embarrassment trembling beneath his smile. Good riddance, he told himself. One less disruption in his perfect little empire of linen napkins and overpriced soufflés. Inside the kitchen, chefs clanged pans and hissed insults at one another, oblivious to the ghost that had just walked through their doors and left. A mark behind Raymond stalked to the bar. His polished shoes tapped too loud on the floor. He caught Jordan, the new waiter, staring at the empty corner table where Elise had stood her ground moments before. "Don't get any ideas, rookie," Raymond snapped, snapping his fingers at the boy's nose. "You see what happens when you let certain people feel too comfortable here? They forget their place." Jordan flinched. He was barely 22, fresh out of community college, and still wore the cheap black vest they gave all the juniors. He nodded, eyes cast down, but inside him something curdled. "Yes, sir." Raymond downed a gulp of his private scotch. The one he told staff was off-limits for their kind. He turned back to the dining room, scanning for any more threats to his flawless night. The restaurant hummed back to life. Crystal laughed, steak knives scraped porcelain. A jazz trio picked up a slow tune. But in the far corner, Elise's table sat untouched, a single chair askew like someone had left in a hurry. Jordan slipped away from the bar, ignoring Raymond's barked orders. He moved to the table, cloth in hand, ready to clear what little there was to clear. As he bent to pick up a stray napkin, his fingers brushed something cold taped under the mahogany tabletop. White envelope, plain, no name. He froze. Looked back. Raymond was too busy showing off for a pair of wealthy patrons. Jordan peeled the envelope off carefully, slipped it into his vest pocket, and straightened up just as another waiter passed by with a tray of oysters. He pretended to wipe the table again. Beneath his calm face, his heart sprinted. Why would she leave this here? He moved to the back hallway behind the kitchen, a cramped space stacked with crates of fine wine that no one could afford except the people who would never share a table with someone like Elise. Jordan checked the hallway camera. Broken. It had been out for weeks, and Raymond refused to fix it because the help didn't need privacy anyway. He tore open the envelope. Inside, a single black business card. No logo, no title, just embossed silver letters that caught. The flicker of the old hallway bulb. Monroe Holdings, LLC, Suite 1800. Monroe Tower. Jordan's mind raced. Monroe. Elise Monroe. That name meant nothing to Raymond, but Jordan's older brother worked construction downtown. Monroe Tower was a name whispered with awe, one of the tallest glass monoliths on the skyline. Word on the street was the mysterious owner had bought out entire blocks just to build it. He flipped the card. One handwritten line in smooth, precise ink. Sometimes they forget who owns the floor beneath their feet. Jordan felt the weight of the words settle in his bones. She owns the building? He couldn't be sure, but something told him this wasn't just a threat. This was a promise. A voice barked behind him. "Boy, stop hiding back there." Raymond's shadow flooded the hallway as he stomped closer. "You think you're paid to loaf? If I catch you slacking off again, I'll—" Jordan turned, card hidden back in the envelope, stuffed deep in his pocket. He plastered on his best rookie smile. "Sorry, sir. Just needed to grab a fresh cloth. Table spotless now." Raymond narrowed his eyes, searching for something to punish but finding nothing. He shoved past Jordan, the smell of expensive whiskey trailing behind him like rot. Back at the corner table, the shadow seemed deeper now. The Mater D glanced at the torn slip, shivered, then turned away. Outside, the city pulsed neon and gold. Somewhere high above this restaurant's snobbery and stained velvet, Monroe Tower's lights burned like a silent sentinel in the night sky. Jordan took a breath. He didn't know what was coming next, but he knew this. That woman hadn't left in defeat. She'd left a match. And something in his gut told him this entire place was about to burn from the marble floors up. Jordan slipped his apron off the moment the clock struck midnight. The staff door behind La Fleur de Lis groaned open onto a narrow brick alley. Damp with summer drizzle and humming with the city's leftover heat, he exhaled, letting the night air wash away the grease, sweat, and quiet rage he'd collected inside. He tapped his pocket. The envelope still there, edges soft now from his nervous fingers. A shadow moved by the dumpsters. Jordan's heart jolted, but then he saw her. Not Elise, but a woman. Mid-30s, denim jacket, dreadlocks tied back in a knot. She leaned against the wall like she'd been waiting her whole life for this shift to end. "You Jordan?" she asked, her voice low but warm. He froze. "Who's asking?" She smiled, a flicker of gold tooth in the streetlight. "Relax. Name's Nia. I'm part of Ms. Monroe's team." She figured you'd find the envelope. Jordan's fingers clutched the pocket tight. "Why me?" Nia shrugged. "She's good at reading people." "Said you've got eyes that see what others pretend not to? That true?" He hesitated, but then he thought of Reman's smug grin, the way the Mater D had turned away, the silence that filled every corner of that gilded room. "Yeah," Jordan said finally. "I see it." Nia's grin widened. She pushed off the wall, reached into her coat, and pulled out a slim black folder. The edges were sharp, the seal embossed in the same silver that gleamed on Elise's card. "Then you're gonna help us, kid," she said. Jordan's head spun. "Help with what?" Nia stepped closer. Her perfume was jasmine and city rain. She spoke softly, like they were planning a heist, and maybe they were. "This place. La Fleur de Lis. It sits on the ground floor of a building Elise's company owns. Long-term lease. But that lease has a poison clause, a moral conduct rider nobody bothered to read." Jordan blinked. He barely understood half those words. So, Nia said, tapping the folder against his chest. "If Raymond violates that clause, like, say, by humiliating a guest for who they are, Elise can legally terminate their lease immediately. Kick them out. Tear it down if she wants." Jordan's mouth went dry. "She planned this?" Nia laughed softly. "She didn't plan his racism, that's been there all along. She just gave him the rope. He tied the noose himself." He stared past her, back at the restaurant's stained brick wall, the warm glow of its dining hall hidden behind curtained windows. He imagined Raymond inside, swirling another glass of stolen scotch, bragging about how he'd put Elise in her place. Jordan felt a flicker of something deep in his chest, the same fire that burned in his grandmother when she marched, the same fire that made his brother work 3 jobs to build something bigger. "What do you need me to do?" he asked. Nia slipped the folder into his hands. "Nothing illegal, if that's what you're worried about. Just watch. Listen. Keep your phone ready. When they try to cover it up, and trust me, they will, you be the eyes and ears." She stepped back, adjusting her jacket. "You're gonna help us make sure the truth hits them before they know what's coming." Jordan looked at the folder. Inside, pages of fine print, copies of the lease, highlighted paragraphs that read like spells written in lawyer's Latin. He laughed. Just once, a nervous, amazed sound that echoed off the wet bricks. "And what happens to the restaurant?" Nia tilted her head, mischief dancing in her eyes. "It becomes whatever Elise wants it to be. A community space, maybe. Or rubble. She hasn't decided yet. But Raymond? He's done." Footsteps crunched. Deeper in the alley, a raccoon knocked over a crate, then darted away. Nia turned to go, but paused. "Oh, one more thing," she said, looking back over her shoulder. "You ever hear Raymond say anything else worth saving? Record it. Ms. Monroe loves receipts." She winked, then vanished into the night, leaving. The smell of jasmine and the sound of the city humming like a secret. Jordan stood alone, folder pressed to his chest. Somewhere behind him, laughter spilled out the restaurant's side door, muffled, careless, blind. Above it all, Monroe Tower glowed white against the night sky, a silent crown watching its kingdom unfold. Jordan knew he should feel scared, but all he felt was ready. Raymond always stayed late when the money was good. Tonight was no different. Hours after the last couple staggered out under the soft hush of violins and velvet farewells, he sat in his corner booth, the same booth Elise had once reserved for dignitaries who now crossed the street to avoid her gaze. A half-empty bottle of single malt perched on the linen tablecloth. Across from him lounged Gregor Wiles, an investor with a gut full of secrets and teeth that flashed too wide when he laughed. "Listen, Ray," Gregor slurred, swirling the amber liquid. "That scene earlier, some people might call that bad. Press, yeah? But me? I call it branding," Raymond snorted. His tie was undone, shirt collar stained with the sweat of false confidence. "Exactly. The right kind of people come here because they know we don't let riffraff ruin the mood." They clinked glasses like they just won a war. The bartender, an old man named Luis, stood by the counter, eyes fixed on the polished wood. He'd heard every word. Pretended not to. Jordan stood by the service bar, polishing empty wine glasses that didn't need polishing. Phone tucked discreetly in his vest pocket, recording every poisoned syllable. "Can you believe the nerve?" Raymond barked. His voice echoed under. The crystal chandelier now dimmed for closing hours. "Some people think money makes them equals. That's not how the world works, Gregor. Not in my house." Gregor's laugh oozed over the leather seats. "Your house, huh?" Raymond leaned back, eyes half closed. "Might as well be. The owner's some faceless trust fund. Never shows up. As long as I keep the brand clean, they keep cutting checks." Jordan's heart hammered at the word owner. He knew more now than Raymond ever would. The trap was so elegantly set, it almost felt cruel. The men kept drinking, boasting. Ugly truths spilled like cheap liquor. Gregor started ranting about the wrong kind of diners bringing down property values. Raymond nodded along, feeding him lines that got darker and dumber with every sip. Louise wiped down spotless counters. He didn't dare look at Jordan, but he didn't walk away either. In the hush of that closing hour, everyone was choosing sides. Quietly, invisibly, Raymond slammed his glass down, startling Gregor's hiccuped snort. "Next week, we're hosting that mayor's fundraiser here. Can you imagine? A few more handshakes, I'll be untouchable." Jordan felt sweat bead at his temple. He pressed his thumb against his phone screen under the bar's edge. The recording app's red dot glowed like a tiny bomb waiting to blow open the marble floors. He slipped the phone into his pocket as Raymond's voice turned slurry. "One wrong type of person shows up again," Raymond growled, pointing at Drunken. "Finger at nobody. I'll drag him out by the hair if I have to." "Nobody tells me how to run my house." Jordan clenched his jaw. Raymond had no idea how wrong he was about the house, about the owner, about who'd be dragging who by the end of this. Gregor laughed so hard he wheezed. "You're a savage, Ray. Damn savage." Raymond laughed too, a sound so hollow it bounced off the chandeliers like a dying bell. 20 floors above the street, Elise stood in her office at Monroe Tower. The windows stretched floor to ceiling, framing the city's endless veins of light. In the distance, La Fleur de Lis glowed soft and small, just another speck beneath her feet. She held a glass of red wine she hadn't tasted. Her phone buzzed once. A single message from Nia. "He gave us everything. The waiter got it all." Elise placed the glass on her mahogany desk. The wine inside shivered with the faint hum of city traffic far below. She pressed a fingertip to the window, tracing the restaurant's faint outline with the cold glass between them. She remembered when she signed the lease. The way Raymond's predecessor, an older man, slick but respectful, had bent over, backward to secure the spot. She'd watched this new manager rise through the ranks on charm and cheap smirks. She'd seen the reports, heard the whispers, but whispers were powerless until you gave them a microphone. She turned away from the glass. On her desk, a thick folder sat open, floor plans, financials, the poison clause marked in bright ink. Her lawyers had begged her for months to pull the trigger. But Elise knew patience was more delicious than brute force. Now the timing was perfect, and the proof was pure. Outside, the city pulsed on. She lifted her phone, hit record, and spoke one word into the night. Tomorrow. Morning poured in through the tall arched windows of La Fleur de Lis, washing last night's poison in pale gold. The velvet chairs gleamed as if they'd never heard an ugly word spoken over their tables. Raymond stood at the host's stand, tie crisp again, hair slicked with fresh pomade. He flicked through a clipboard with the bored authority of a king, counting taxes he'd never pay himself. Behind him, the staff shuffled in, Jordan among them, all wearing that same frozen smile they'd been trained to hold. But beneath it, Jordan's pocket buzzed with a secret Raymond could never silence. At exactly 10:30. The front door opened. 3 people stepped in, 2 men and 1 woman. Perfect suits, leather portfolios, soft shoes that whispered across. Marble. The Mater D blinked in confusion. Raymond glanced up and caught the hush that fell like an unexpected draft. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice all polite ice, the version he reserved for surprise health inspectors or journalists sniffing for gossip. The tallest man stepped forward. His pocket square matched the subtle silver thread in his tie. He spoke softly, but every syllable landed like a judge's gavel. "Mr. Archer, good morning. We're from Monroe Holdings Compliance Division. Routine lease audit. You were notified last quarter, I believe." Raymond's brow furrowed. A drop of sweat peeked at his hairline, but he smothered it with a forced grin. "Of course. Just didn't expect you so early, or today." The woman in the group flipped open a leather binder, crisp pages neat with yellow tags. "Ms. Monroe likes to keep her holdings current. May we?" Raymond gestured stiffly. "By all means." They spread out, one at the bar, another at the Mater D stand, the woman drifting toward the back offices. Their soft voices blended with the faint clatter of early prep in the kitchen. The entire staff seemed to breathe shallowly, eyes darting to Raymond when they thought he wouldn't notice. Jordan hovered near the espresso machine, wiping cups that didn't need wiping. When the tallest man paused by the bar, Jordan moved closer. "Jordan, yes?" The man asked quietly, checking a staff list clipped inside his binder. "Yes, sir," Jordan said. Double quotes, "Ms. Monroe sends her thanks." The man murmured, just low enough to vanish beneath the hiss of steaming milk. "You have it?" Jordan's hand slipped into his pocket. The phone. The file. The raw recording, Raymond's own voice, drunken and clear, dripping with the poison clause Elise had waited so patiently to expose. Jordan placed the phone on a folded napkin, pushed it across the polished marble bar. The man's fingertips brushed it away as if accepting a sacred relic. "Good work," he said. Jordan wanted to ask what happens now, but the look in the man's eyes told him he already knew. In the dining room, Raymond's forced charm began to fracture. He hovered too close behind the woman flipping through old contracts in the back office. He barked orders at Luis to bring fresh coffee twice, then barked at him for moving too slowly. Finally, he cornered the tallest man by the host's stand. "I hope you people aren't planning any surprises," Raymond said, his grin thin enough to snap. "I've run this place better than anyone before me. Profits up 15%. Reputation spotless. Ask anybody." The man closed his binder with a soft click that echoed louder than Raymond's words. "That's precisely what we're doing, Mr. Archer." Raymond's smile twitched. He glanced around at the Mater D, at the silent rows of polished cutlery, at Jordan, who stood too still behind the bar. He felt the eyes. He felt the silence shift, cold as a draft beneath a locked door. "Routine," he he said again, more to himself than anyone else. Just routine. The man didn't nod. He simply turned to the Mater D. Please have Mr. Archer's lease file ready for our counsel within the hour. We'll need the full staff list too. We'll be interviewing them. Raymond opened his mouth, but the Mater D spoke first. Of course, sir. Right away. It stung worse than any slap. Raymond watched them spread through his kingdom like polite ghosts. Every polite yes sir and thank you felt like a hammer tapping cracks in his marble floor. He turned, searching for Jordan's eyes behind the bar, but Jordan had already turned away, polishing glasses that glowed like trophies in the sun. Luis had seen the marble floors laid down. He'd polished them when he was 25, scraping grime from cracks he wasn't paid to fix. Now he was 60, polishing the same floors for a man who barely remembered his name. He stood behind the bar, his hands steady around a fresh pot of coffee. The compliance team's woman, Claudia, sat across from him, recorder blinking red, pen poised over a legal pad. Tell me about Mr. Archer's management style, she asked, voice soft as if they were swapping recipes, not secrets. Luis looked down at his hands, old hands, clean hands. Hands that had poured too many glasses for people who looked through him like frosted glass. Mr. Archer likes to remind people who's in charge, Luis said quietly. Claudia nodded. Remind who? Luis lifted his eyes, dark, tired, unafraid. Now, us, the ones who can't talk back. The ones who don't match the decor. Claudia's pen scratched the paper like rain on a tin roof. Has he ever said anything that might violate the moral conduct clause? Luis smiled. It was the saddest smile in the city that morning. You'll have enough on that tape from the boy. But if you want my piece, I've got years of it. He reached under the bar. A shoebox, old and battered, scuffed with decades of hidden moments. Claudia raised an eyebrow as he set it between them. What's this? She asked. Luis opened the box. Inside, scraps of paper, receipts, napkins with scrawled notes, tiny fragments of memory, a cruel word here, a whispered order there. I wrote it down, Luis said. Every time he slipped. Every time he spat something he'd deny later. I knew it'd matter someday. Claudia flipped through the scraps with careful fingers. The shoebox felt heavier than any file on her desk. Why keep it hidden until now? She asked. Luis poured her a cup of fresh black coffee. Steam curled up like a silent vow. Because no one listens to an old man until someone richer than him decides they want to hear it. Claudia looked up, a quiet respect softening the lines of her face. Today someone does. Luis nodded. Somewhere deep inside, a knot he'd carried for decades loosened by half an inch. Upstairs, in her glass tower above the city's heartbeat, Elise watched the live feed from Claudia's body cam. Her lawyers sat behind her, 3 rows deep. Tablets glowing, pens flicking over contract addendums they wouldn't need. A screen displayed Jordan's recording on loop, Raymond's drunk brag echoing with crystal clarity. Another showed the scanned napkin scraps Luis had surrendered, piece by piece. Any retractions? Elise asked, voice calm as the skyline behind her. Claudia's voice came through the conference speaker, clear and steady. None, ma'am. The staff's lined up. Half are ready to talk. The rest are staying silent, which is just as telling. Elise didn't smile, not yet. She tapped a manicured nail against her mug, black coffee. Gone cold hours ago. Raymond had been a stain she'd tolerated too long. Part of her, the side that believed in second chances, had given him rope enough to tie his own fate. Now the knot was tightening. Get me the city press, Elise said to her head of PR without looking away from the screens. An exclusive. Tonight. The woman behind her made 3 calls before Elise even finished her sentence. Elise finally allowed herself a small breath. Not quite a smile, more like the ghost of one dot in the reflection of the window. Monroe Tower's vast glow flickered over her shoulder like a crown made of steel and ambition. Back in the dining room, Raymond paced behind the Mater stand, forced grin now a twitching grimace. He watched Claudia shake loose his hand, watched the staff whisper in pairs when they thought he wasn't looking. Jordan passed him by on the way to the storage closet. Raymond grabbed his arm, squeezing too tight. "What did you say to them?" Raymond hissed. Jordan blinked, the perfect mask of rookie confusion. "Sorry, sir? You're all turning on me." "I see it." Raymond's breath reeked of stale coffee and panic. "You think you're gonna get me fired?" "I built this place." Jordan stared, heart pounding. He thought of the napkin scraps, the shoebox, the recorded slurs. He thought of Elisa's calm. Promise that some floors don't belong to the people who stomp on them. He pulled his arm free, polite smile razor sharp. "It's not your house, sir. Not anymore." Raymond flinched like he'd been slapped, but Jordan was already gone, slipping behind the door, carrying the weight of everyone who'd waited too long to speak. The dinner rush glittered like nothing had happened. Couples whispered over candlelight. Waiters weaved through the maze of tables, balancing plates that cost more than a week's wages. The piano in the corner spilled out soft jazz that tried to drown out the truth swelling. In the walls, Raymond adjusted his cufflinks for the 5th time in an hour. He'd forced his hair back into place, changed ties twice, and threatened Louise with suspension if the wine list wasn't perfect tonight. But the hush wouldn't lift. Eyes kept drifting to the door, as if everyone knew something he didn't dot at. Precisely 7:15, the glass door opened. The hush snapped into a silence so sharp the piano stumbled into silence mid-chord. She stepped in. Elise Monroe. No entourage. No security detail in black suits. Just her tailored charcoal coat draped over her shoulders like a mantle. Her heels slicing the hush with each step. Raymond's throat went dry. He forced a grin that cracked at the edges. "Miss Monroe," he said, pitching his voice high. Enough for the guest to hear. "I apologize for—" "Don't," Elise said, her tone so soft the whole room leaned in. "You've spoken enough for both of us." She stopped at the Mater stand. Claudia appeared behind her, handing her a single white envelope, embossed, sharp, final. "Elise," Raymond reached out, but she stepped past him, turning to face the dining room instead. Dozens of patrons watched. They didn't pretend to read menus this time. They watched history fold itself across linen and crystal. Elise's eyes swept the room, pausing on Jordan near the bar, on Louise frozen behind the counter, on the line cooks peeking through the swing doors. "I'm sorry to interrupt your dinner," Elise said to the guests. Her voice was calm, almost gentle. "But I thought you should all know whose table you've been sitting at." She handed the envelope to Raymond. He took it like it was on fire. He ripped it open with shaking fingers. His eyes darted across the words, the poison clause, the lease termination, the clause so easily triggered by the words he'd spat like poison for years. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Elise turned slightly, letting the staff see, letting the diners hear every heartbeat in that suffocating silence. "This restaurant is closed," she said, her voice ringing like a bell in a cathedral. "Effective immediately. You have 24 hours to vacate my building." A single fork clattered to the floor somewhere near the back. Raymond lurched forward, face red, sweat beating at his hairline. You can't just—" "The mayor's event, the investors," Elise tilted her head. Her eyes glittered like glass. "Find another roof, Raymond. This one was never yours." He looked around, searching for a face that would stand with him. The Mater stepped back. Luis wiped his hands on his apron and met Raymond's glare with a blank, exhausted stare. Even Gregor Wiles, half drunk at his corner table, sank deeper into his leather seat. eyes wide as if watching a car crash he'd bet against. Raymond's voice cracked. "Elise, please. I built this. I made this place." Elise stepped closer, her shadow falling over him like an eclipse. "You built a cage and called it a throne. But you forgot who laid the marble under your feet." Raymond dropped the envelope. It fluttered to the polished floor like a white flag. The silence cracked. A couple near the bar stood up and clapped once, hesitant, awkward, but it spread. A soft ripple of approval from people who'd never admit they'd seen the ugly under. The linen. Raymond fell back against the Mater Dei stand, eyes darting for an exit he couldn't find. The doors behind him swung wide. 2 men in charcoal suits stepped in. Not bouncers, just polite, calm men from Monroe Holdings. "Escort Mr. Archer to his office," Elise said to them. "Help him pack. He'll be gone tonight." Raymond opened his mouth to curse, to plead, to threaten, but the words tangled in his throat. His kingdom was gone. The walls he'd hidden behind were someone else's bricks. The floors he'd walked across were borrowed ground dot, and the woman he'd tried to humiliate now stood taller than every chandelier glittering above him. Outside, the city roared on. Elise stepped back through the glass doors, the hush behind her swelling into whispered shock. She didn't look back at Raymond. She didn't need to dot, she just walked into the night, the building at her feet, the skyline in her hands. Raymond's voice still echoed through the back office, a dull, pathetic murmur muffled by the thick walls and the quiet authority of Monroe Holdings' security team. Outside his office door, Louise leaned on a broom he didn't need to hold anymore. Jordan stood beside him, clutching a fresh set of keys that felt heavier than they looked. Beyond them, the main dining room lay empty for the first time in years. No clinking glasses, no polite laughter hiding sharper truths. Just silence, raw and honest, soaked into the velvet chairs and the polished bar. Elise walked through it all like a queen surveying a kingdom ready for rebirth. Her heels clicked across the marble Raymond once called his throne room. Every step scrubbed away a little more of his stain. She paused by the Mater Dei stand, fingers brushing over the wood where he'd once slammed down her torn reservation slip. Jordan cleared his throat. "Ms. Monroe." "Elise," she corrected gently. "No Ms. tonight. We're all family now." Jordan's lips twitched into a shy smile. He held out the keys. "You should have these back." Elise looked at him, young, steady, carrying the echo of 1,000 silenced voices. She curled his fingers around the keys instead. "No," she said. "You keep them. This place is yours now, yours, Luce's, everyone's who stood here and kept it alive when he tried to choke the life out of it." Louise huffed a dry laugh. "You're giving this place to us?" Elise turned, taking in the empty tables and soft shadows. She didn't see what was, she saw what could be. "I'm giving you the chance to make something that feeds more than just the rich." She sighed. "This block, my block, is going to be different. We'll gut this place if we have to. Build a kitchen that trains young chefs who can't afford culinary school. Open the doors to families who've never sat under these chandeliers because some fool thought linen napkins made him a king." Louise blinked, throat working around words he'd never imagined he'd say. "And you trust us to run it?" Elise stepped closer, rested a hand on his shoulder. "You've been running it this whole time. He just took the credit." A laugh bubbled out of Jordan, young and bright and exhausted. "What'll you call it?" he asked. Elise looked around at the dusty corners that had hidden cruelty behind silk curtains, at the walls that had trapped whispered slurs like smoke. She smiled, for real this time. The first true smile since she'd stepped through these doors and tasted Raymond's. "Poison. The open table," she said. "No reservations needed." Luce's chuckle cracked into a soft, hoarse cheer. Jordan's grin split wide, the keys clutched tight in his palm like a medal. Outside, neon lights flickered down the block, a city forever humming with secrets and second chances. Elise turned toward the window, watching Monroe Tower blaze. Across the night sky, she remembered her father's voice, his stories about working double shifts in restaurants that wouldn't let him eat in the dining room he scrubbed clean. She remembered her mother teaching her to sign her name big and bold on contracts nobody could tear in half. Now here she stood, contracts honored, marble floors retaken, keys handed over to the people who should have owned them all along. Tomorrow, she said softly, repeating the words she'd whispered in her tower when the hammer first lifted. We start fresh tomorrow. Louise pushed away from the broom, shoulders lighter than they'd felt in decades. Jordan slipped the keys into his pocket. Heavy, warm, real dot together, they stood in the hush of the emptied hall. No chandeliers glittered for Raymond anymore. No whispered insults slid across the floor unseen. Just voices ready to speak, tables ready to welcome everyone. Outside, the first hint of dawn bent around the city's edges, not golden yet, but patient. A promise. And deep under the marble, where old secrets once slept, new roots took hold, humble and hungry and strong. Enough to crack stone. By mid-morning, the block outside the old La Fleur de Lis buzzed with an energy it hadn't known in years. The gold script sign still clung to the window, but someone had already taped white butcher paper across it. The words "The Open Table" coming soon were scrawled in thick marker, crooked but proud. Kids pressed their faces to the glass. Elders stood back, arms crossed but eyes soft with cautious approval. Mothers with strollers paused on their way to work, whispering to each other about the rumor that Raymond was gone. Inside, Jordan propped the door wide. No velvet rope tonight. No Mater D blocking the entrance with polite disdain. Just him. In his rolled-up sleeves, sweeping out stale memories with each push of the broom. Louise stood at the bar, wiping down surfaces that suddenly felt like they belonged to him. He moved slower today, but with a pride that made his shoulders square. Again. And Elise stood by the front window, watching the people gather. She caught bits of conversation through the open door. Some suspicious, some curious. All awake. Is it true she owns the whole block? About time they kicked him out. You think they'll really let us in? A little girl pressed her, nose to the glass. Elise crouched down until they were eye level through the pane. She tapped it lightly. The girl giggled and darted back behind her mother's leg. Elise stood, pushed the door wider. Let's not keep them wondering, she murmured to Jordan. He nodded. You sure you want a crowd? She laughed, small, real. If they're curious enough to stand here in this heat, they deserve to hear it from us, not from some whisper. On the corner, Louise flicked off the overhead lights, chandeliers gone dark, sunlight streaming in instead. No more velvet illusions. Just clean air and open space. By noon, a small crowd drifted inside. Tentative steps on marble that had once told them, you don't belong here. Shoes squeaked. Children's laughter bounced off walls that hadn't heard it in decades. Louise poured sweet tea into mismatched mugs, leftovers from the kitchen's back shelves. Jordan carried out a tray of cookies an old line cook had dropped off when he heard the news. No reservations, no rules, no hush. Just voices filling a space that had been starved for them. Elise climbed onto the bottom step of the grand staircase Raymond once used to make dramatic entrances from his private office. She stood where everyone could see her, but this time there was no stage. Just people gathered close, shoulder to shoulder. Thank you for coming, she began, her voice clear over the quiet hum. Some of you have lived on this block your whole lives. Some of you used to work here or got turned away at the door. A low ripple of nods and murmurs. The truth didn't sting anymore. It just bound them closer. Elise went on, her eyes sweeping across mothers, grandfathers, teens in school uniforms leaning against marble columns. "This place is yours now," she said. "We're tearing out what doesn't belong, keeping what does. And we're building something that feeds this neighborhood, not just with food, but with jobs, chances, second chances." Luis stepped up beside her, crossing his arms. He didn't say much. He didn't have to. His presence spoke enough. "We're still here. We're not afraid anymore." A woman near the front, older, silver hair pulled back neat, raised her hand. Her voice cracked when she spoke. "And you'll really open it to everyone?" Elise met her eyes and nodded. "Everyone. No suits required. No velvet rope. No reservation list that picks winners and losers." The crowd breathed it in. A young man near the back whispered, "About time," loud enough for laughter to bubble up through the group. Jordan lifted the tray, offering cookies down the line. It felt small, but it tasted bigger, a promise sweet as sugar, warm as sunlight through dusty glass. Outside, someone started taping up a fresh sign over the butcher paper. Neat block letters this time, "Open soon for all." Elise stepped off the stairs and into the crowd. She shook hands, held babies, listened to stories about old diners that closed when rent went up, about dreams that wilted under velvet ropes. And in the hush between stories, one truth settled in every chest. This marble floor wasn't cold anymore. It was home. 2 weeks later, the marble floors glowed under warm lanterns instead of chandeliers. Mismatched chairs surrounded sturdy tables built by local carpenters, who knew more about hunger than profit margins. The gold sign above the door now read "The Open Table." The velvet rope was gone, traded for a chalkboard that listed tonight's menu in big looping letters, half in English, half in Spanish. Jordan tugged at his crisp apron, palms sweaty, heartbeat tapping out a new rhythm. Under his ribs, Luis stood beside him behind the new bar, smaller, humbler, but real. His bar, they'd scrubbed the old stain out of every corner. They'd pulled up carpet, torn down silk curtains, let the sun in where Raymond once shut it out. The kitchen gleamed, not because it was fancy, but because it was clean and theirs. The doors opened at 6, not for a gala, not for a tasting, but for everyone. A line of neighbors snaked around the block, families, students, retirees who'd once peered through the windows and told themselves maybe one day. Tonight was that day. At the front stood Elise, hair tied back, sleeves rolled to her elbows. She greeted every guest at the door with a handshake or a hug. When people called her Ms. Monroe, she shook her head and said, "Just Elise tonight." Inside, the room hummed with the quiet miracle of old neighbors meeting again at long tables, strangers sharing plates, kids laughing under the soft hum of lanterns that flickered like fireflies. Jordan poured water, served rice and beans alongside, dishes Luis had perfected over decades but never got to name. Each plate went down with a story. "This came from my mother's garden. This spice blend was my grandfather's. This meal belongs to you," near the back. The silver-haired woman who'd once asked Elise if she really meant everyone now sat with her grandsons, one leg draped over the other like a queen. She caught Elise's eye and raised her glass. Elise raised hers back. "Sweet tea, no champagne tonight." Luis leaned on the bar, watching the dining room. His hands trembled less now, busy hands, proud hands. When a young cook called out for help with the oven, Luis barked back, "I'm coming," like he'd waited his whole life to say it and mean it. Halfway through the night, Jordan slipped outside for air. He leaned against the brick wall, breathing in the smell of food and rain and city heat. He felt Elise join him before he saw her. She handed him a cup of hot tea, nothing fancy, just strong and sweet. "You good?" she asked. Jordan chuckled, voice rough with disbelief. "I don't think I've ever been this good." They stood shoulder to shoulder, watching the line outside shrink but never disappear. New faces arrived every few minutes, some drawn by hunger, some by the whisper that the marble floors were warm now, that the open table didn't care what you wore or where you came from. "You didn't have to do this," Jordan said after. "A moment. You could have just kicked him out and sold the place." Elisa's smile was tired, but real. Selling it would have been easy. Living with it, harder. A car rumbled by, music thumping through rolled-down windows. A kid on a skateboard shouted a hello. Jordan shouted one back. Elise took a sip of her tea, eyes on the glow spilling out the door behind them. "My father once told me," she said, voice soft but steady, "if you ever get the keys, don't. Lock the door behind you." "I don't plan to." Jordan didn't answer. He didn't need to. The hum of laughter and clinking forks set enough dot near closing time. They all sat at one long table, cooks, dishwashers, neighbors who stayed late, to stack chairs and sweep floors without being asked. Elise took the last seat between Luis and Jordan. No head of the table, no throne. Just a place among all the others. Luis lifted his glass, sweet tea again, brown and golden under the soft lanterns. "To tomorrow," he said. They echoed him. Voices low but sure. "To tomorrow." Outside, the neighborhood settled into sleep. The block still buzzed with rumors, laughter, fresh paint. Monroe Tower rose above it all, but tonight Elise didn't watch it from behind glass. Tonight, she sat right here, warm tea in her hand, roots under her feet, no velvet rope, no locked door. Just an open table. And enough seats for everyone who ever thought they'd never have one.